Ricardo, your 10 seconds begin now. I'm going to click live.
All right. Good evening, Mzansi. Welcome, South Africa. Good evening, South Africa, and welcome to our final mental health workshop. For me, it is such an honor to be your MC tonight. We have made a significant progress in terms of hosting this event, and I can't believe that tonight is actually the final evening of our three-part series. I firstly want to say thank you for each and everyone that sit in through all the three sessions. Thank you for your loyal support, and also thank you for supporting Golden Key South Africa. So while we're going to give some time for people to join this webinar, please just comment on the chat function. Just tell me where you're from, because this is a national webinar. So I would like to know from which area from South Africa you are joining us from, or like from which part of the world you are joining us from. So please, thank you, and thanks for attending. So I see we have Luciana in the place. Welcome, welcome. Purusha from UCT, welcome. It's nice to see you. Werner said he is from Rotterdam. Welcome, guys, for our final series. Ahmad says he's from the UAE. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Natasha's from Syrian. Thanks for your loyal support with this series. Jessica is from Bisho. Welcome. Potchefstroom is in the house. Tandy from UCT. Welcome. Well, it is such an honor when I see international participants. I see Canada. Welcome. Pretoria, Northwest University. Amy from Cape Town. We have another Amy from Pietermaritzburg. Sanel Thomas from Joburg. Kevishan from Cape Town, welcome. UWC. We're just going to give a few minutes though for people to join for this session, and then I will give over to MK in just a few minutes just to make some important announcements. But thank you for your engagement. We have United States, we have Johannesburg, we have KZN, we have UCT, we have Pretoria. Italy, wow, Jordan, welcome. It's such an honor to see international people joining us as well. Doornfontein, we have Middelburg, UP, United States of the Free State, welcome, UP. Vanderbijlpark, wow, Mpumalanga, Mafikeng, wow, Bloemfontein, Rhodes, welcome guys. Elsie's Rivier, Sugir, Limpopo. I feel like all the provinces are present tonight. I'm so glad to see we up 120 participants today. Welcome so much, guys. And I think we have given enough time for everyone to join. Stellenbosch is also there, so we are ready to start. So good evening, everyone. I'm Ricardo Smart, and I will be the MC for tonight's session. And today we are going to talk about coping with stress and academic pressure. I can honestly relate to this topic. I feel like this is a topic that we actually need to speak freely and openly, and even on a daily basis, just so that we can have a norm to say, well, we are facing COVID-19 and these are part of our daily struggles. And I'm so excited that we could have this topic tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And firstly, I just have a few announcements. We have a Q&A function. So we have a chat function that you're more than welcome to put down some comments over there. But if you have particular questions, please post it into the Q&A function, of which our speakers will be able to attend that. Thank you so much. And I will give it over to MK for special announcements.
Okay, thank you so much, Ricardo. Good evening, everyone. I'm Konimola, and I am currently UWC chapter president. So I just want to let you know that this is actually a three-part series, mental health workshop. So we've had two events already. The first one was on stress management through us, where we were actually looking into like how can we actually cope with stress using art, like any form of art, music, drawing, but it was mainly focused on drawing because the person we had there was actually a painter, and they actually introduced us to so many things that we could actually do, and actually there's so much in painting. And the second event was on psychological distress, prevalence, implications, and coping strategies. And what actually stood out for me there was the self-assessment activities that we had to do. And obviously this is available on YouTube. So if you'd like to know more about these past events, then you can go to YouTube, search Gordon Key Southern Africa, and then you'll find them posted there. So I've encircled one of these events on YouTube in green. So and obviously, I would like to encourage everyone here to please, and also tell everyone else to actually go to YouTube, search Golden Key Southern Africa, and subscribe, please. And let's get that number to 10,000. I mean, it's possible. So then now today we are, like Ricardo said, we are going to have an event which is actually the last one in our series. It's about coping with stress and academic pressure. And actually that is all from me. Then I'll hand over to Ricardo. Thank you so much.
Thank you, MK. There was a question in the Q&A. Just think someone's mic. MK, please switch off your mic. Thank you so much. So someone asked a question based on where they can access the previous two sessions. So what you can do is getting some echo.
Sorry,
right.
So you had two profiles signed in. I've just the other.
All right, thank you so much. So there was some question where you can access the previous two sessions. What you can do is to just go to the Golden Key Southern Africa page, and then you will be able to find the previous sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now the time where I need to introduce you to our two speakers. And I will first start with Hilary van der Westhuizen. Hilary van der Westhuizen is a registered social worker with a bachelor's degree from the University of the Western Cape. She had the privilege of working in child protection and then moved to the private sector conducting employee wellness, employee assistance programs to corporate companies, including private hospitals. Hilary gained a great deal of experience being part of a multidisciplinary team and was able to coordinate a social work department. In 2019, she entered into private practicing, addressing various psychosocial and related challenges. In 2019, she joined the CSSS team on contract basis, supporting and counseling students. Francesca Fafero is an intern counseling psychologist working within therapeutic services at the Center for Student Support Services at the Western Cape, at the University of the Western Cape. She has a background in the addictions treatment industry and working with young people. Loving adventure and new experiences, Francesca's tertiary education has taken her to 3 universities across South Africa. She began her tertiary education at Rhodes University, joining the Rhodes University Golden Key chapter during her second year in 2011. Upon completion of her undergraduate degree, she obtained her honors in psychology at the University of Cape Town. She is currently completing her master's degree in counseling psychology through the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Ladies and gentlemen, over to our speakers.
Sorry for that. Let me just get the slideshow up and going. Okay. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Ricardo, and thank you for having Hilary and I here today. We're very honored to be included in your three-part mental health series, and we are so happy to be able to contribute and engage with the students here. So we'll be starting our presentation.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much, as Francesca has mentioned, for this amazing opportunity. It's so good to be here. I trust that you guys will enjoy what's coming up. So this evening's presentation focuses on the pressures that are associated with problems or associated problems faced by high academic achievers and their impact on academic and mental health, focusing particularly on perfectionism, procrastination, and our harsh inner critic. The pressures and realities of being a student in any field, we have to look at the fact that the realities is a high workload, and the fact that we are working online at the moment doesn't make it any easier. It's obviously been a very challenging for students. We feel like there's not enough hours in the day, so students are literally pulling all-nighters, sleep deprived all the time. Some of the students are using all kinds of energy drinks, turbo vites, but maybe you guys can tell us a little bit about that later. But with the limited sleep and the use of boosters and energy drinks to help to cope and to also make the time that you have useful and effective in everything that you do. Studying while at home. Recently, some people have said that it's not working or working from home anymore, it's working with home, because there's so many responsibilities in terms of what we do at home, in terms of the relationships that we have, the support systems that we need to engage in, so that knowing that we need to work, we need to study, but there's also other chores and things that also need to be taken care of. Unstable work-life balance is also something that is extreme reality of students, is that looking at what your support system looks like and how this impacts on our relationships and our studies. Sorry if I'm looking down, I'm just making sure that I'm just speaking everything that I wrote down, speaking about everything. And then we need to pay attention to your energy levels and your level of enthusiasm when it comes to your studies, looking at the unstable work-life balance. It's also unrealistic for us to say that we compare or say we need to have a universal work-life balance, because my work life and your work life and another student's work life is different. So our balance, in order to find balance, it makes it challenging because your circumstances are different, your responsibilities are different. So these are all things that play a role in how we do these things. And in balancing all the demands while still trying to navigate your individual journeys that you are on, could and may, and a lot of the time, lead students to a point of stressfulness and burnout, and could and does affect our personal growth. And then we look at the level of responsibilities that we have, as previously mentioned, and just in itself having to to transition to university, from being at home and having to transition to university life and having to get to know new people and having to meet new friends and build a support system in your respective spaces. That, in addition to everything else, also creates a lot of discomfort, if we can call it that for now. And then looking at the independence, a lot of the time students, especially those who are high achieving students, they do look at or they want to work alone, they enjoy working alone, they want the independence, but the independence also comes with its own responsibilities. And so we'll ask questions in terms of, do you then have a strong self-awareness? Are you, when you work from home, are you able to, or work alone, are you able to ask for help? Or do you internalize your stress and not really speak about it? And this obviously would have an effect on our mental health and adds to unhealthy behaviors which students generally practice.
Okay, so we've spoken about some of the general pressures that all students tend to face. We also really wanted to touch on some of the pressures that may be especially relevant to you as a top academic achiever, and to look at where this pressure is coming from. That this is a dual pressure often for many, coming from external sources, such as from family or funders if you have a scholarship or a bursary, where you are required to report back with your academic results. And more than that, and what we tend to see with high academic students who report for counselling, is that while there is external pressure, the most pressure comes from the self. So this is an internal pressure, and that this can weigh really, really heavily on individuals who put such immense pressure on themselves to keep achieving and to achieve what they feel they are able to do. And, you know, part of this really speaks to the pressure to maintain high academic results when you are as a person who achieves well. And this often is also linked to the fear of judgment that is often all too prevalent. And the fear that you will lose esteem both from yourself and from peers, lecturers, community members, families, and other people if your results do decline. So this is all to say that what we often see is that for higher academically achieving students, that the label of achiever can often become a central part of identity. Of our identities, and that when that happens, when we have an identity where there is one very, very central part to it, anything that will threaten that, you know, threaten that part of your identity will wound the sense of self. So if you fail to live up to that title of achiever, you may be known, and this title may go back as far as, you know, grade school, as far as high school, within your community, being the clever one, the smart one, within your family even, being the one who achieves, the one who doesn't need help with academics, that the family doesn't need to worry about, and that this can, for a lot of people, really form quite a central part of their identity. And as a result of this, what we see often is that one's self-worth becomes contingent on the academic results, and that these are used as a proxy and a metric for how we self-evaluate and for how much we feel worthy and for how we feel about ourselves. And this is to further say that that when our self-worth does become contingent on academic results, it can lead to a hyperfixation on achievement. Given that for many people, when achiever is part of their central identity, it feels so threatening that to lose that part of identity, to lose that self, that the only solution is to really hyperfixate on how can I maintain this? How can I make sure that I am achieving and that I am an achiever in the way that I perceive myself and that others perceive me in my community and in my class. And that this is linked quite highly to perfectionism.
And perfectionism can be identified as the need to be or appear to be perfect, or even to believe that it's impossible to achieve perfection. And as a result of that, one would then constantly strive for ambitious goals and judge their self-worth on the achievement of these goals. And then, of course, not meeting these goals, whether they are realistic or not, is then met with self-criticism and loathing. And it is said that there's a thin line between pursuing excellence, as it facilitates creating productivity, and perfectionism, which can be damaging. And so the effect of perfectionism on mental health is then correlated with symptoms of anxiety and depression, self-harm, eating disorders, chronic stress, and associated symptoms such as headaches, insomnia, and fatigue.
Okay, so I assume we have some economics majors or people who've taken some economics before. So this is a little shout out to you. It's a very nice little metaphor using sort of economics 101 concepts in terms of how we think about perfection and time. So when we think of diminishing returns, the concept of diminishing returns, which I've got outlined here on the slide, when it comes to perfectionism and perfectionistic tendencies, what often happens is that the single factor of production that we see in this case here is often time spent. It's time spent studying for tests, time spent rereading your assignments, being very preoccupied over each sentence that you write. And what we see here is that just like the law of diminishing returns, putting in more effort, staying up all night to study doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a better result, that at some point you will face diminishing returns. So we're not here to discourage you from trying your best and from utilizing your time and from studying well, but to realize that there is a point at which that you are not going to get the same kind of returns based on what you are putting in regarding time, which brings us to something else here, which is the concept of opportunity cost. So this is the loss of other alternatives when one alternative is chosen. So for those who really do struggle with perfectionism, that cost of time, of really needing to put in those extra hours to make sure that every assignment is perfect, to make sure that that everything that you're studying, your study notes are perfect, the mental energy of that, to just be aware that there is an opportunity cost here, that when one is spending so much time hyperfixated on achieving perfectionistic goals in a way that is quite dysfunctional to one's own well-being, you are losing out on the opportunity for other things in your life, such as spending time with family and friends, taking care of your physical health, taking care of your spiritual health, and all of these things. And that sometimes it can be, with all these pressures that we've been talking about, it can be really hard to sort of zoom out and see that, because it can be so easy to get into the state of mind of I'm here to study, I'm here to do the best, and that is my full-time job, to the exclusion of everything else in one's life.
And so as we go forward, and before we could possibly go to the next slide, I just want to I want to ask a couple of questions. I see that as a Kyla said that this presentation is quite needed, or maybe it's just the topic. So in this moment, I'm going to ask a couple of questions that I would like you guys to answer, okay, for us. So the first one goes like this. I want you to consider your current situation and the way that your studies are taking place, how you are preparing for your assignments, how you are working in terms of preparing for exams or tests or assessments. And I want you to pay very good attention to your health and in terms of what triggered you to come to this session. And I want to ask the question, I want you to ask yourself the question, is this healthy for me that I'm doing right now? My study methods, the way I am, the way that I'm feeling at the moment, am I working on autopilot? I'm going to give 3 questions at a time. And should I take a moment to pause? Let us know how you guys feel about those 3 questions. Is this healthy for me right now? Am I working on autopilot? And should I be taking a moment to pause? Let us know your thoughts. Thank you, Dylan. What Dylan has right now is working for him. I'm going to mention another question as you guys continue. Am I taking care of myself? Can I try to take one thing at a time? Can I give myself permission to let go? How can I relax at this moment? Am I speaking positively towards myself? If you hear the words that you speak to yourself, what are the words that you are saying to yourself? I see it coming through, guys. Some people feel like they have to pause. Others are working in autopilot. Kavashin, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, is concerned if she lets go, but never be able to get back on track. Okay. Sarah is currently on antibiotics. Okay. Right. So she was too busy working to go to the doctor. Don't have the time for myself. Definitely negative self-talk. Okay. Not only in academic work. And so many more. There isn't enough time in the day. Sure. Yeah. And so in answering these questions, and thank you so much for those who have answered and shared their views. I hope you realize, and let's just focus on the fact that it's how often we put our health on hold. We put life on hold. We don't take care of ourselves. We don't use our time efficiently, mostly focusing on mental, physical, and emotional well-being, neglecting physical exercising, not eating properly, not sleeping properly. And so these are things that students are faced with sleep deprivation, where you deal with things and symptoms, as mentioned previously, in terms of headaches, some people with stomach problems, and some students end up not going to class. They're so overwhelmed that they feel like maybe just missing class or avoiding it is going to help for a few minutes, because they don't want to feel that extra stress. And so these things all create anxiety, sometimes suicide ideation, sometimes even depression. And so I want you guys to make sure that and know that when you are sleep deprived, it affects our learning, it affects our memory, it even affects our emotional regulation when we did not get enough sleep. So imagine not eating properly and not sleeping properly, not getting any of those your physical well-being is not or not dealt with or attended to, but yet we strive to focus when it comes to our work. So we'll get to, so as we move to buffering against the academic pressures, the stress and psychological distress of mental illness, I want us to seriously consider and pay attention to our emotional self-care. Guys, our health is our responsibility. We are responsible for our own health. And so with the information that you've gained in the last 2 workshops and hopefully this evening, is that you'll be able to change that. So journaling is a good thing. Writing down those feelings, writing down the thought patterns that you are seeing. If some people are not always comfortable speaking to someone, so making sure that you are able to get it out and writing it down may be a good thing. Speaking to someone whom you trust, and speaking to someone about what your realities actually are and how are you feeling about those realities. And if you don't have someone who is close to you in terms of a friend or a family member, tap into your therapist at the university, and that will be shared a little bit later, some of it. But tap into the people and tap into your support structures that is available. Practice self-care. And so self-care is a word going around, but it's easier said than done, right? But we need to try and we need to implement. So be aware, it's being aware of what it is that you are eating, eating properly, prepping for meals, maybe prepping 2 meals tonight so that you have a little bit of time tomorrow to actually just breathe and maybe read or take a time out before you get started on your studies again. Budgeting and making sure that financial stress and pressure doesn't also impact on your health. Physical self-care, exercising. And again, I'm not saying that you need to all join the gym. It would be great if you are, fantastic. But there are things that you can do within your own personal space that you can apply to take care of your physical health. If that means walking in your space, little breathing exercises, little stretching exercises, and even stretching exercises while you are studying, in between your breaks when you are studying, that would be a good thing. Keeping the motion going. Getting enough sleep. Guys, sleep is so important. Make sure that you are getting enough sleep. And I mentioned earlier on that students are pulling all-nighters, and tomorrow you sleep all day because you can't function, or you want to try and fix an assignment or get it done, and it becomes a bit of a challenge. Make sure that you get proper sleep. And also things where's your cell phone when you are sleeping? Is it under your pillow? Is it across the room from you? Are you on your phone when you cannot sleep? All these things are things that you need to look at practically to improve your sleep. And then, of course, things like getting some sun when you can, taking a walk if you can. All right. And then we look at the mental self-care. This is where you're not focusing on anything related to your academics. Taking a time out, resting, having a break, taking a walk away from your workspace. That's doing something, an activity that stimulates your mind. Chess, reading a book, and anything else that you find, painting, artwork, knitting. You guys know what it is that you enjoy doing and that what makes you feel relaxed, and try to implement some of those things. Social self-care. It's hard enough with COVID that our social connections are restricted. And we were created for connection, right? And now that we have to learn online, it changes everything. So engage, make sure that you are able to engage in positive and supportive relationships in terms of your studies, as well as in terms of your external or extended support network. That's important as well. So make time to grab a coffee. Make time to have a conversation with someone, because it's only going to benefit you. And then, of course, your spiritual self-care, having to meditate and being outside in nature and enjoying the spaces that you find yourself in. And pray. Okay, so as you plan your studies and diarize your tests and your exams, make sure that you are diarizing your breaks, that you're inserting your break times into your calendar, so that just as you do with everything else, it's on there and it's something that you can eventually tick off. I hope that that is helpful. Sorry, Francesca.
No problem. Before we move on to the next slide, I'd just like to live answer a couple of questions I see coming in here. So press on live. Oh, do I like hit record? Would you like to answer the question live? Sorry, not really great at that with the technology, but from Kyla, who's asking, as a fellow psychology student, how do you manage the work-life balance? And I think, you know, and this is not only for psychology students, but especially for any students that are in the helping professions or in a program that leads to the helping professions. So our doctors, our nurses, our social workers, our OTs, any of our allied health professionals. And, you know, what I will say is that what we do know is we know that the turnover rate, especially, you know, for psychologists, is so high due to the level of burnout. And we see this in doctors, and I'm not quite sure in the research on other professions, but I'm sure it probably follows the same trend. So for me, self-care is non-negotiable, and taking care of myself and having trying to my best to have that balance is non-negotiable, because while I am I'm not quite young anymore, but I still hope to have a few good decades in this career without burning out. So I think it's really about prioritizing that. And, you know, you'll often hear this this very overused cliche, perhaps, of that you can't pour from an empty cup. And it's so true. I know that if I don't look after myself, in all of these different spheres that Hillary's just been talking about for self-care, that I am not a better therapist to my students. I'm not doing anyone any favors. So I suppose a good example, Kyla, you know, would be for today. Today, I'm, you know, very happily volunteered to help facilitate this workshop, but it is something that's happening after hours, and I know I do get quite tired towards the end of the day. So I took a much longer lunch break today, and I had said in my team meeting this morning, in fact, that I was going to do so, and receive the full support from my team, who also know how important it is that that we need to take breaks when we need to, and that we're doing this not out of any sort of selfish notion, but really to be the best. And that as a result of having an extended lunch break and getting to relax a little bit, you know, on top of seeing clients and everything else I've done today, I'm able to be really present with you here now this evening. So it's all about kind of, you know, really just trying your best in any given situation and making it a priority. So yeah, that's for you, Kyla, and anyone else there who had a similar question. I'll also, I'll answer one more right now, so answer live. Okay, so from Portia, you say that you're currently working on autopilot and you've recognized it's not healthy, and it seems like you've got a lot going on: full-time mom to a teenager, wife to husband, part-time worker, to keep the pot cooking, as well as want to achieve top at all times, and that you're feeling that you're majorly cutting from sleep, which is not healthy at all. And I think, Hillary really touched on that, but when our sleep is one of the first things to go, that really has a huge knock-on effect on academic functioning, on cognitive functioning in general, in fact. And so what I will share with you, Portia, while there are no easy answers to everything in life, I'll share with you this lovely metaphor that I quite like. That talks about, how we talk about juggling different balls in our lives, with the balls being representative of different responsibilities. The thing that we often don't realize is that some balls are made of glass and some balls are made of plastic. And while we are trying our best to juggle all these balls, what we need to do is make sure that we are not breaking the glass balls, that if we drop a ball, it's a plastic ball. So if you are having to do an assignment that is due and you are not able to cook dinner and have to get takeouts, or if the family needs to have toasted cheese for dinner, or something really simple that they can do themselves, that is a ball that's okay to drop. That is not going to be a make or break situation here. So it's really about, I think, assessing for you in your situation, what are the things that are the most important to you? And those are your glass balls that you must very much try not to drop. And I really do hope that for you, sleep can become one of those glass balls that you do try preserve, and see that, like we spoke about, there are only so many hours in a day, and it sounds like you're a super mom, Portia. But something does have to give sometimes. So to be aware of, well, what am I letting slide? And how is that going to affect me? Okay, done. Okay, you're most welcome, Kyla. See you.
Sorry, can I, before you go on as well, I also see Suzanne asked the question of how would you advise a student who considers achievement to be central to their identity? And I've come across this quite some time, and Francesca, I don't know, you can help me here, but I've also come to realize that we have different phases of our lives, and in every stage of our life there are expectations and things that we need to do, and we have to determine who we are, not to be confused with what we do and where we are going. So Suzanne, if that answers your question, we have to be careful that studies is what we do, and it is but a stepping stone for us to our next level in our lives. This which we learn, we gain knowledge, we gain skills, and that we are going to use. You're empowering yourself right now, you're equipping yourself. Each and every student equips themselves with gaining the knowledge that they do when you're studying for the next phase, so that you can go into practice and do what you do. But it doesn't define who you are. And so therefore, maybe it's an exercise to just make sure, who am I? If it's not for my studies, if I'm not studying, then who am I? I'm hoping that that answers your question, Suzanne.
Okay, so moving on to procrastination, and I suppose the question is, who here is a procrastinator? Or maybe I should have written, who here is not a procrastinator? And what we often see is that, procrastination is a very, very common set of behaviors that students display. So I thought we'd kind of just touch on why we procrastinate. This is something that often brings people a lot of distress in their life, that, they can't get started on something or can't finish something, in terms of an assignment, or a reading, or whatever it may be, but they are unable to stop procrastinating. So the first reason why we may procrastinate is linked to that perfectionism, as well as self-sabotage. And I'm going to sort of link these together quite nicely here. But for a lot of people, what's happening in their minds, either on a conscious or on a more unconscious level, is the sort of narrative of, well, if I don't try my best, then I can't blame myself if I don't do well. So it's this kind of internal saboteur and perfectionism working together, going, I'm already creating a narrative that will be comfortable for me to have if I do not reach my goal, if I don't get 90% on that essay, I can always say to myself, well, you only did it the night before, so of course you got a lesser mark. And that the other reason that we see people procrastinate is, and it's quite linked to this as well, is that fear of failure, and wanting to put off the tasks to avoid having to think about the achievement. And to also note that when we're talking about failure here, I always like to make the distinction between objective failure and subjective failure, because for high achieving students, often when I'll have a client and they'll say, oh, I'm doing so badly, at university, and I'll say, well, what does badly mean to you? And what we often see is that for someone, getting an 85% feels completely unacceptable, feels completely like a failure, and that in and of itself sort of fosters this habit of procrastinating. So, I think it's important to acknowledge that for some people, procrastination does work, and those tend to be the people who work really, really well under pressure, and also only tends to work for certain tasks. So those are tasks where there are a deadline, something, like, okay, well, you are writing that test in 48 hours, so you need to study. As opposed to something that may be a bit more vague, like a PhD thesis, where the end date is not as set. So there are some times in which procrastination can be adaptive, where it helps people really work their best under pressure. But for a lot of people, there are disadvantages of procrastination, and we often don't stop to think about what these are, and rather kind of think of procrastination as this annoying little thing that is in our lives. But the one thing, that I'm sure most of you who procrastinate will be able to relate to is a feeling of increased stress levels. That time crunch, knowing that I have only so many minutes to upload my essay to Vula, to Canva. I'm not sure what Stellenbosch or other universities uses their intranet, where you can submit assignments. And in terms of stress levels, and this comes along with increased cortisol, which can really impact on our health in quite a negative way. And in addition to this, another disadvantage of procrastination is interrupted sleep patterns. And we often see this, really highlighted during that pre-examination and examination period, where people like Hillary was talking about earlier are pulling all-nighters after all-nighters. And as a result, we have these really interrupted sleep patterns that can, really do a number on circadian rhythm, making it difficult for us to be able to return to a normal, healthy sleep schedule afterwards. But also staying up all night or procrastinating studying, whereby you're cramming the night before an exam or a test or whatever it may be. What we find is that you have really poor information retention and poor information recall. So there are a lot of disadvantages to this behavior that we really do need to take into consideration when we see how is this behavior working for us. Because it may be working for some, but I suspect for a lot of people, it's behavior that doesn't work. and that doesn't serve you.
And so it brings us to the cycle of procrastination. How is it that we find ourselves in the situation all the time? So if we look at the cycle over here, it's unrealistic goals that are sometimes set, denial that there is actually a problem. And sometimes if you are, let's for example, say the work is too much, let's for example, say you don't understand an element of the work, and that tends to put people off. So the minute you start struggling or the minute you find it difficult, you steer away from it. But it's also having to set unrealistic goals. It's having to leave things to the last minute that causes a delay. And then that delay is caused by fear, anxiety, and stress, which leads to now we don't meet our deadline. So it's a missed goal. We don't meet our deadline. And that in itself then creates worry again, because, oh my goodness, what now? Are they still going to accept it? Can I still make it? There's a lot of self-criticism that happens there. And we end up then avoiding the task that we were actually supposed to complete. And we avoid it completely. And so when approaching the deadline, we become overwhelmed, anxious, and it leads to disappointed. We are now disappointed in ourselves for not meeting the deadline. And we try to rationalize why and how we're going to commit next time to do better. So it's a consistent thing of, I don't do anything, I feel guilty about it, I doubt myself, and that's where the self-critic comes in, self-criticism comes in, and then I feel helpless, which brings me right back to the point of not doing anything. And so it continues, the cycle continues, this feeling of hopelessness continues until we make a deliberate change in the way that we do things.
Okay. So what we thought may be useful for you was a couple of tips to hack your environment to buffer against procrastination. And some of these things may be new to you. Some of them may have been things that have been suggested to you in the past and are sort of common knowledge. And I suppose we start with the first one, which I'm sure we'll have a few people groaning in the background because you've heard this so many times perhaps, but don't study on your bed. The mind associates your bed with sleeping. So if possible, really do study at a designated studying area, such as a desk, a dining room, or a kitchen table. And of course, we understand that everybody has different living conditions, and that there may not be space to study, to have an ideal study environment, and that the bed feels like the only option. And in that case, we really do advise to, really draw on the resources around you. So if you have friends who maybe have a bigger space that they're willing to share with you, that you can go study with them. If you have access to your campus and study areas such as the library, or even, I'm not sure if public libraries are open these days, but there are other options, and that if we are associating a certain place with our studying behavior, with our academic work, we're less likely to do other things that we may do while we're on our bed, such as scrolling through social media, which brings me to my second point here in terms of limiting distractions. So something that I found quite helpful in terms of working with clients who come and present and say, like, I'm struggling with being distracted, with motivation, with being able to actually stick to a study timetable, that there's all these distractions around us. One little tip that seems so small has seemed to have had quite a profound effect on many people, and that is to take your chosen scrolling vice, that's what I call them at least. So this is your TikTok, your Twitter, your Instagram, maybe it's your Reddit, or whatever sites you like to window shop on, if there's an app for it, take it off your home screen on the phone. The one thing that we know about habits and we know about behavior is that if it's easy to do, it's more likely to happen. If you make it inaccessible, and you may think, okay, well, what, putting it in a folder or putting it in my like second screen that I have to swipe to, you know, that's not much of you know, a deterrent to me. You'll be surprised that, you know, when you pick up your phone and you don't necessarily see that TikTok logo, that you will be less inclined, more often than not to do that extra, those 2 extra clicks, which is an additional cognitive load. So definitely encourage you to try this if this is something that you are falling prey to. And yes, as I had mentioned earlier, if home or res isn't a conducive place to studying, go to the library, go to a friend's place, find somewhere where you will be able to study, and that you're not going to be falling into those traps of procrastination, like needing to rearrange your sock drawer for the 18th time this year. And so the third tip here is to organize your digital space. And this is so relevant, especially where we are right now, in terms of pretty much most programs being online, that we've gone from having handouts and, often a lot of readings that maybe are given out to you, to everything really being on quite a digital space. And that, while you've often heard in the past show about how important it is to keep a clear desk, to keep a clear physical space for your mind, the same is true in terms of your digital space. And I'm most certainly guilty of this. If you look at my my desktop, it's embarrassing. It does not reflect an organized digital space. So, what is really suggested here is that to ensure that your study material is easily located so that it facilitates studying. So this means having folders for each of your courses, having subfolders if necessary for different topics, sections, or theories, so that when you do sit down in your designated studying place, that you know where to go, that it's not a situation of, oh, I haven't downloaded this yet and I need this, and that you're having to gather all of your digital resources together. And this, well, maybe you're not necessarily being a hack on the environment, but on the environment on your but towards how you are in the environment you find yourselves in, is to give yourself a break. So often, people take pride in pushing themselves, in working in this society where we prioritize busyness. And it is so important to give yourself a break, especially when you are in really demanding tertiary academic programs, that you need to take regular breaks. And this not only helps with increased concentration and recall, but it also makes your procrastination less likely if you know you have an upcoming break. But if you sit down at the beginning of the day and go, well, I'm sitting down and I'm studying until, I absolutely have to eat something, it's going to be a lot easier to fall into the claws of procrastination in that way.
And so, guys, as we slowly come into a close, we would like to talk about the harsh inner critic, which we are sometimes our biggest critics. And I want you, and that's why we asked you in the beginning, when you're paying attention to what are the words that you are using towards yourself. A lot of the time it's things like, I don't know, I can't do this, I don't know how to do this, how could I be so silly, or how could I be so stupid. People use that word. I could have done so much better than this. And he or she, because we tend to compare ourselves to your peers, that you feel that they're smarter than you, so you say things like that. It's very judgmental towards yourself. And so being the harsh inner critic, it tends to focus on the problem, looking and identifying the lack that there is instead of the good. You don't always celebrate the progress that you have made in your academics or in anything else. And shame, guilt, and fear is used as motivators, when instead we would like you guys to remind yourself of the good things, the positive things, to celebrate the victories. So the thinking errors that normally take place, I should have been able to get 90%. Why couldn't I have done better? And like Francesca earlier mentioned, getting a mark under a specific aimed mark, that the objective that you had is not good enough for you. And so we have to deal with our thinking errors. We have to deal with our internal parental voices and expectations, those which we have grown up with and been surrounded by, and now that have become our own, and our own self-inflicting thoughts that we have. So I would like you guys to focus on that. And as after this presentation, that you start focusing on solutions. Become more mindful of the words that you use towards yourself. Celebrate the small victories, the small progresses that you have made, instead of looking at why it wasn't done in a certain way. And then I hope that you can identify the good, so that you can learn to put your negative thoughts away and start doing positive self-talk. Be kind to yourself, be compassionate to yourself, and start speaking positive things towards yourself, and remind yourself that you are more likely to work better, absolutely better, if you are kind to yourself and compassionate. And always a reminder that if you are struggling, to contact the university's clinic or therapeutic services where you can gain access. And if you can't, then to low-cost therapy at work, or more affordable therapy at work, wherever you find yourselves in, to be able to address these challenges. So your challenge would be to implement self-love, so that your academics can shine through self-love, because all of you are amazing in your own rights, and it's to take better care of yourselves.
As we are coming to the close of this session, just wanted to highlight, some of the takeaways of. Sorry, I'm having a bit of technical issues here. Some of the takeaways that we hope you may take from this presentation, and then being that, there are very real academic pressures that you may face, and we really encourage you to reflect on those that apply most to you and work on reducing those, and that this is something, that could be facilitated through therapy. If you are someone who would like to have access to that, where you have a designated space to be able to set goals and work on these pressures and how to alleviate them, or in some cases, how to accept them if they are unchangeable. And that while Achiever may feel central to your identity, we want to remind you that there's so much more to you than your academic results. I remember a time when I was suffering highly from perfectionism, where it felt so important to me that people thought that I was intelligent and that I kept that image up. And, through a lot of work in therapy and through a lot of, self-reflection and also just growing with age, for me now, I kind of almost get annoyed when people tell me that I'm clever, because that doesn't feel like something that is the most important thing about me. I want to be thought of as a kind person, as a person who cares about other people. So, you know, really also to take this opportunity that if achiever really does feel central to your identity, to think what else is important about you. In terms of self-care, really just to reiterate here that it is vital for your sustained functioning in all spheres of life. And this includes how you perform academically. You need to take care of yourself. Something give, unfortunately, and I've heard, you know, many stories which I suppose sometimes are even thought of as folklore, in terms of a student once having, you know, done a 48-hour all-nighter and drunk a bunch of Red Bulls only to go into an exam and write their name over and over again, going into a slightly dissociative state. And while I don't know if it's true or not, if it's kind of a horror story, you know, we definitely do hear stories of people, you know, falling asleep in exams, of people not being able to actually finish writing the exams because they are so exhausted from that lack of sleep. And then also touching on perfectionism, realize that this may not lead to better academic results and it can contribute to mental health problems as we outlined earlier. You know, be this chronic stress, be this disordered eating or symptoms of anxiety and depression. And then also just a reminder that that procrastination does have its disadvantages that can impact on your academics, but not only your academics, also on your mental health as well. And if we don't have good mental health, what essentially happens is that at some point your functioning in all other spheres declines, and that includes your academic functioning. So taking care of yourself if you are anyone, but especially a high academic achiever, is imperative to make sure that you can continue doing at university. And then lastly, that having a harsh inner critic is likely to be more demotivating than encouraging. Often we really get stuck into this, you know, into this narrative that, you know, if I don't be mean to myself, if I don't say, oh, you've got to do it, you've got to do it, you've got to do it, that you're not going to do anything and that you're going to be unproductive. But if you think about how we talk to, you know, how you'd want to talk to a little brother or sister or a little child, you know, children, just as us grown adults, are more likely to do something when they're met with kindness, when they're met with empathy, when they're met with, I know how difficult this is, but you do need to cover this section. You can do it. Some encouragement instead of an inner critic and voice that says, you're pathetic, you can't do anything. So what we want to leave you with here is we know that that this is a national and seemingly an international workshop that is being given, but we wanted to put up some resources here and really to encourage you to take a photograph, to take a screenshot, a print of your screen if you're on a laptop, for the services that are around. We've only put here on the right-hand side for the Western Cape universities, as we do know that this was a collaboration between the three. So if you're at UWC, therapeutic services can be accessed for free, and you just need to email cSSS@uwc.ac.za. If you need immediately help, there's a 24-hour toll-free helpline for UWC students, which you can see below here. For UCT, you can contact the psychologists at their wellness center on the following numbers here. I do believe that at UCT, at least the last time I was informed, that there is payment that needs to be made, but that is on a sliding scale and depending if you have medical aid, and that the cost is still very low cost. For Stellenbosch University, they have two different crisis numbers and two different email addresses here if you want support for from therapeutic services in the form of counseling, or if you need more academic support. I'm not quite sure what the status is in terms of the access to the counselling and whether that is free or if it does require a minor cost. But for everybody else in South Africa, we do have SADAG, and SADAG is really wonderful. It's a South African Depression and Anxiety group, and they have a variety of helplines here, you know, that you can call, including a WhatsApp chat line, as well as a substance abuse helpline, which we didn't really get to, you know, talk on much, but Hilary did bring up at the beginning is, you know, what we often do see in high achieving students is the development of substance abuse, especially with stimulants that are able to keep you awake for longer and increase your concentration. So if you are struggling with substance use, definitely do reach out either through the helpline or through your relevant university's counselling services. And then right here at the bottom, we have Lifeline. And Lifeline is if you're in any distress, if you're having any suicidal feelings or just need you need some support. They're also toll-free, available nationally, and are there to help you. So I want to thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for the questions. I don't know if we have time to get to some more of them right now, but thank you for showing up today, especially during such a busy time, and thank you for prioritizing learning a bit more about how to cope with academic pressures and how to take a bit better care of yourself as we go into this upcoming exam season.
Thank you so much, Hilary and Francesca. This was such an interesting topic to discuss. I have picked up a lot from the comments and the type of questions that have been asked. So what I would suggest is just for you as the speakers, just to stay behind 5 minutes after the thanks, as well as the participants that have asked questions. So we can just give you some time just to address those questions live. Just because when I read the questions, I do feel it's quite important that we do need to answer them. So we'll just give like an extra 5 minutes to address that. But thank you so much for the talk. I will give over to Parusha to do the note of thanks.
Hi there. What an amazing conclusion to our mental health series. I'd like to thank our lovely speakers this evening, Hilary van der Westhuizen and Francesco Favero, on behalf of Golden Key, for sharing the insight and knowledge with us. This was so relatable, and I think we all needed this reprieve from academic and work-related pressures. So we are truly grateful for your presence on our platform this evening. To this end, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Golden Key Southern Africa for hosting this series, for the UWC, Stellenbosch, and UCT Golden Key chapters, and thank you to my incredible teammates Ricardo and Mokone, who were absolutely amazing behind the scenes and planned events. Lastly, thank you to everyone who took the time to join us this evening and at the previous two events. It's been an awe-inspiring experience to see so many of you come from far and wide to join these sessions. We appreciate your support and hope to see you again soon. Have a lovely evening and a good night further. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the question here that we have from Mareka, who asks, what would you say is the main difference between OCD and perfectionism? So OCD is a mental health diagnosis, which refers to when a person has obsessive and intrusive thoughts, which are then followed by compulsions in the form of either actions or thoughts that are needed to cope with those obsessive thoughts. Perfectionism, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily relate to OCD, and I think there's often a lot of misconceptions in the media, especially because people use the word OCD quite colloquially and say, oh, I'm so OCD, I have to have my books stacked in a certain order. I'm so OCD, I have to, have my closet color coordinated. That is not that kind of perhaps maybe perfectionism is not to be conflated with OCD, and that people who do have a diagnosis of OCD, which is an anxiety disorder, may or may not exhibit perfectionistic tendencies. but that isn't in fact really mentioned anywhere in terms of the diagnostic criteria for OCD. In fact, what we do see linked to perfectionism more often is eating disorders, and that is seen as one of the maintaining and perpetuating factors of eating disorders according to research. What you may be also talking about is something called OCPD, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which really speaks about rigidity and perfectionism that can come in there. So I hope that answers your question. Hilary, do you want to take another question from the Q&A?
Sorry, I was just answering in the
text
box. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm very new new to this here.
I just wanted to check with Natasha Ricardo. The sessions will be uploaded because someone's just asking how they get access to the recordings, and I think I heard you say that it's going to be uploaded onto the YouTube channel. Am I right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Hilary, it will be uploaded on the YouTube channel under Golden Key Southern Africa, as well as Golden Key Academy.
Okay. Right. And then I think it's just Esther. I think Esther will the statement. Or just saying that she thinks it would have helped her during her studies to really understand the concept of what.
Oh, Hilary, it looks like you've accidentally muted yourself there.
Oh, sorry. I think it's because I realized I was reading the question out loud. But I don't think it's a question. I think she's just saying how it would have helped her.
Okay.
With her own studies.
We've got one last one here from Melita, who says this presentation was very insightful and informative. Thank you. My question relates to how to alleviate some bad habits in terms of academic anxiety that might stem from childhood. I see here that you work in foundation phase education, and in these grades you can already see learners being obsessive perfectionists and not being able to handle making mistakes if they're being labeled a high performer. What would your advice be for students who come environments and backgrounds like this and maybe need to work a bit harder to get rid of these bad habits? I mean, I feel like that's a really loaded question, but I'm going to try to touch on some things here. And I think that, you know, what we've really been seeing, at least in the last decade, is that the pressure for students is starting younger and younger. At least, you know, I don't know, back in the 90s when I did grade 1, I don't remember feeling stressed out, but now you hear of such young children really, you know, feeling the pressure from that very, very young age. And it's really, really difficult. I think that it's quite hard in order to combat this, because this is very much a reflection of what's happening sort of culturally in terms of attitudes and beliefs, that, you know, achievement is important and that it is the be all and end all, and that we need to get the best marks so that we can get into the best high schools, so that we can get into the best universities, so that we can get the best jobs, so that we can be the happiest, that kind of narrative. But in terms of, you know, for if you're asking for advice for your students, Melita, you know, I would maybe, you know, have conversations with the parents as well, that if the pressure is coming from the parents, when you do get opportunities, you know, in terms of parent-teacher conferences, to do a bit of psychoeducation for the parents in terms of, you know, how harmful and distressing it can be for the child to feel this anxiety, and to let them know that the child is feeling this anxiety, so that they can A, monitor that at home, and B, that if they are contributing to that anxiety that the child is, you know, displaying with perfectionistic tendencies, and not being able to handle making mistakes, that they can also, work collaboratively, because I'm sure, while everybody wants their children to achieve, they also want their children to be mentally healthy at the same time. So I don't think I've done a very good job at answering that question, but it's quite a complicated one.
If I can maybe add, sorry, Ricardo, just a quick one. If I can add to Francesca, I think also in addition to that is for the parents and maybe the teacher to be very mindful of the communication. I think in terms of affirmation for those kids, and not only in terms of the completed task, but acknowledging the work that they put in to be able to achieve the results or the output, and so then acknowledging the child, and so they're not just looking at the task but also at the individual, and for the teacher then to be able to acknowledge that, and so that it builds confidence in the child, more than just the task that was completed, if that answers the question as well, to affirm the child and the effort that they've put in to get that outcome.
Thank you so much. So we have just one last question, and then I think we can call it a session. So I'm gonna read it for you. So the last question is, what advice would you give to someone who is comfortable and spends so much time within academic setting that they feel some stress reaching out into and or devoting time to other areas of life, such as work or relationships?
Hilary, do you want to take that one?
I'm just reading the question again quickly. So I think that is also where, and I know we spoke about work-life balance, but I've recently read an article that speaks about work-life engagement more than the balance, because everybody's lifestyles are different. And maybe, Anonymous, that you need to be able to find, engage, knowing that engaging in the different parts of life will then create that balance, and building on the same amount of effort that you put into the academic setting, that you also then devote some time to other areas. And it's important to build on the relationships, because again, bringing us back to that thing of academics being just a stepping stone to the next phase of our lives, and again coming to identity in terms of, if I'm not studying, what am I doing, and if I'm not studying, who am I? So to kind of just bring it back to that, if that answers the question. And so I would hope that you could spend some time in some self-reflection in terms of that, and what about those other life areas or creating that stress, and getting to the root of the problem. If that answers. Francesca, anything from your side?
I think, I had an answer, but I feel like it's not relevant so much due to, due to the pandemic we find ourselves in. I was just sort of reflecting on, my undergraduate career, and how wonderful some of the Golden Key events were, in terms of being able to really, not only network, but form friendships with people, and to use, something that is sort of a bridging activity for you, that doesn't feel way too much out of your comfort zone, but that there's already some kind of shared quality or shared interest there. So that's what I would say. I'm sure we're not going to be able to have many events going forward, as we are now in the third wave. But yeah, okay.
Thank you so much, everyone. So I do appreciate all the speakers tonight. I think you guys were amazing, and you guys truly introduced a topic that we need to talk often We actually went a whole 30 minutes after what we initially planned, but thank you so much. And I also want to thank the participants for joining in tonight and participating in this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our 3-part series. Have a great evening, and thank you for supporting us. Thank you, Hilary and Francisca, for informing us. I think this discussion was quite fruitful. And I also want to thank Natasha. You have been a superstar by hosting us this event, and also MK and Barusha. It was absolutely a pleasure to work with you guys. Thank you everyone for joining in. Have a great evening. Stay safe and wear your mask. Good evening.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much, Ricardo.